Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about the evil of factory farming. I did a poll on this yesterday, and you guys chose this. You guys chose this video option clearly, right? The second option was far behind, so I'm going to be doing this one first, and I'm going to be doing that one later. Now, I want to address some things before I actually get onto the video, okay? And the thing is, I've decided to keep doing personal videos, right? I've decided to keep talking about personal topics, right? Obviously not like I used to, but I'm going to still include sub points here and there to prove my point. And if I get hateful comments, then my policy is still going to go ahead, right? And I've decided to do this because, number one, as I said, I've got my policy, and number two, which is the main reason, is underneath my David Benatar video, I had two hateful comments, two, again, stupid comments, I guess you could say. One of them, basically, I didn't talk about anything personal. That was intellectual, I guess you could say academic, philosophical video, and I still got comments accusing my videos of being, accusing me of being, quote, boring as a motherfucker, because I used a lot of filler words, right? And here's the thing, if you don't, again, I'm going to say this basically for the last and final time. If you don't like my channel, if you don't like my comment, if you don't like my content, you can leave. You don't have to watch it. And, you know, these people have been banned. They've been, you know, their comments have been taken down and reported, right? I've not got time for this kind of stuff, right? Now, I'm going to try and use filler words less, of course, because that just makes the video, you know, better. But I can't guarantee anything in regards to that, right? Again, this individual is now blocked. I don't want him on my channel. But then again, this shows that I will always have this problem on this channel. Now, moving on from that, let's move on to the actual topic of the video in question, right? Factory farming, right? Now, this is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a long time. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because this is a serious moral stain in our society, right? We think that we live in a moral society. We think we live in a society that respects other people, right? Not even other people, but sentient beings. We think that we're very good to animals. We think that we treat animals very well or with respect. And I think in a lot of aspects, when it comes to especially household pets, or even, I guess you could make an argument for zoos. Yeah, sure, okay, fine. If you're thinking about it in terms of the evil of nature and how animals tear each other apart and things like this, okay, sure. There's arguments to be made on both sides. However, in regards to this particular issue, this is, in my opinion, unacceptable. And just to say that, I just want to say that this is the reason that I went vegetarian a couple of years ago, right? Because I saw a couple of documentaries on this issue, and I decided that I could no longer partake in eating meat, right? And let's look at this historically, right? Historically, meat was very rare. It was eaten on celebrations, right? Like maybe say like a birthday cake, or on religious holidays or something like this, right? Animals were usually kept like livestock, right? Pigs, chickens, cows, etc., right? They were kept mainly as, I guess you could, not pets, but work animals in a way. Or like, for instance, eggs would give you, sorry, chickens would give you eggs, lambs would, sheep in general, not lambs, would give you wool, things like this, right? Cows would give you milk, etc. Now, when it comes to that was the past, right? And now with industrialization, of course, everything can be made pretty much very cheap and pretty fast, right? And in a way that reduces the quality of items. However, the problem with this is that people expect higher quality nowadays, right? People want very high quality items. Well, not very high, but high quality items for cheap, right? That's just how human beings are. And as industrialization and development of societies continues worldwide, then what's going to happen is this is going to become more of a pressing issue. People want to eat meat. Meat is seen in many places as a luxury item. It's not necessarily as a luxury item, but it's seen as something that indicates you've made it in life, right? That you can eat meat regularly, right? In a lot of developing countries, and it's seen as the main. It's a main it's a main source of nutrition for most people. But when we actually look at factory farming, when we look at the evil of it, we see that we can't really justify this, right? Now, first and foremost, most people don't care about ethics, right? And as I said before, in the past, right, people would have to kill the animal themselves, right? Or someone close to them would do it, right? So they would carry that burden on themselves. They would see, okay, this is what I'm doing, right? I mean, people didn't really care back then, but it was still different. You still did it yourself, right? But now all of that is locked away, right? It's not visible to a human being, right? Most of the time to the end consumer, and this is all done behind closed doors, right? And you just get the end product at a supermarket or a restaurant or whatever. But at the end of the day, we need to think about this. These are sentient creatures, and the reason, the reason I stopped eating this stuff is because I'm a secular Buddhist and I believe in something known as GSC, and the amount of animals that are locked in cages, right, is astronomical, right? I can't give you guys an exact number, but millions, maybe even hundreds of millions. Okay, maybe not that much, but maybe we don't know, right? I don't know, right? I don't have the stats in front of me, right? But that's besides the point. It's a lot of animals, right? Agriculture is one of the major parts, for instance, in the British economy, right? In the American economy, right? Most of Europe, right? This is a staple of life, right? However, look at how we treat these animals, right? As the demand has gone up for so-called high quality meat, maybe not even high quality, but just meat in general, right? The conditions get worse and worse for the creatures themselves. And this is why, if you've looked at any documentaries on this issue, animals are often not sterilized before having their beaks, for instance, chicks, right? I'm going to talk about male chicks in a bit, but a lot of these animals have their beaks clipped. A lot of pigs have their hooves. There's a term for it, but I forgot what it was. But I think it was like they have their hooves clipped, or not clipped, but something else. They have them taken off or something. And there's so many examples of this, right? Animals being shoved into damp, dirty, crowded, very overcrowded. Sometimes the cheapest variety of chicken you can get is not a broiler chicken, it's just your regular chicken. And the thing is, they put so many hormones, especially in America, but even here in Europe, in the UK as well, they do a similar thing. They put a ton of like chemicals in them, or they just fatten them up to such an extent because they're seen as a commodity. They're seen as something to sell, and these animals grow way too much. Their bodies are not built to handle that kind of weight, and especially when they're packed with like a ton of other chickens in like a tiny little metal cage, they get stressed out. They start fighting. If they've even got space to fight, that causes injury, that causes infection. This goes for all the animals in this condition, especially like pigs and stuff. I've done extensive research on this. And the fact that animals are being kept like this is not okay, right? And imagine if you were one of these animals, right? So, you're from birth, right? You're raised in way, way, way worse conditions than we should be treating sentient creatures. We are treating them like dirt, not even like animals, right? We're treating them like they're not sentient, like they don't have, that they're not living creatures, right? So they just give them enough, sometimes just to survive, or sometimes just to fatten them up. It depends what they're using them for. And then what happens is they feed them because of the conditions that they're placed in. They're very prone to catching diseases, so they stuff them full of antibiotics. And if you guys know anything about antibiotic resistance, what does that mean? That means that as more and more antibiotics are given out, that makes resistance much higher, and that affects us as well, right? And the amount of antibiotics they're giving to these animals is insane, right? I heard a statistic that most antibiotics go to these animals, right? Because they're the most prone to infection. And I just think that that's a serious problem, right? I mean, not just for them, but for us, right? because they're placed in suboptimal conditions, right? They're not living the lives that they're meant to live. So the quality of the meat is lower as well as a result. But then again, everybody wants to go to, I don't know, your chicken shop or something and get some chicken, go to KFC, go to wherever, right? Get a chicken burger from McDonald's, that's my point, right? And oftentimes when people are taken to these places, they become vegetarians because they see, first of all, how filthy the actual slaughterhouses are. And that's just the slaughterhouse. That's not actually where the animals are kept, right? Think about it. When just look at that picture on your screen for a second. Really look at it, right? Pause this video now and look at that picture. How many chickens are in that little shed? Well, it's not little, but you get my point, right? For them, it's little, right? For such a large amount of chickens, it's a tiny space, right? And maybe 5,000 minimum, right? That's a lot of chickens, man. And these are a lot of the times, they're too stressed to to cope. And I've seen chickens. I've seen images online when I was scrolling through the images to include in the background of this video of dead chickens, right? Chickens that were too weak to walk because of infections, right? And they were just left there, right? And that causes disease over time, right? That causes serious infections, right? And that spreads to the other chickens, right? And yeah, I mean, it's just like, and the actual process of killing the animals is different, right? Now, a lot of them are killed in a relatively humane way. Of course, it depends where you are. Here in the UK, if it's not halal meat, it's usually just a shock to the back of the head, and then they're out, right? And another thing as well is, I mean, I don't want to talk about halal meat because that's a separate issue entirely, and YouTube's already looking at my channel, so I want to be a little bit careful. But I think that it's very important. If you eat meat, if you're not a vegetarian, you need to look at where your meat comes from, because you have to look at as I said, you have to look at where your meat comes from, because and maybe just be a little bit more conscientious on, maybe pay like, I don't know, 20-30 more p if you can afford it for higher quality meat, or meat that's been treated with care, or maybe look for, let's have a look here, maybe try and substitute your meat with something else. Tofu is very good. And I'm talking as someone who, I'm not a complete vegan, right? I have cheese, right? I have milk, I have eggs, right? Eggs are very important for me, right? But here's my problem with eggs. I think that chickens raised for meat and chickens raised for eggs should be separate. I'm pretty sure that they aren't, but in terms of like different kind of arrangements and stuff. And I think that the chickens that are raised for eggs should be treated much more humanely, and they shouldn't be killed, right? And I mean, if that raises the price of eggs by like 10-20p, so be it. But I don't want the animals that I'm getting eggs from, because there's a label on British food, it's like cruelty free or something, but that was apparently exposed as being fake because they still treat the animals very poorly, and that's something that I want to be fixed. But I think that people should stop eating meat as much, right? I think, in my opinion, meat is overrated, right, for the average person. And I think you can get all of your protein needs met without having to eat meat all the time, right? If people stopped eating meat all the time, for instance, if you eat meat every day, reduce it to like once a week, right? That's a start. But again, this is never going to happen because it makes too much money. Same thing with the tobacco and the alcohol and all that kind of stuff, right? And sugar, right? It's never going to stop, right? I'm not saying I want sugar to stop. That's a different issue. But I think that we need to completely change this system because it's unsustainable, right? And the last issue I want to talk about is like methane, right? If if global warming, climate change is a massive thing for you, the worst gas and actually the main source of it is this factory farming. Because first of all, the amount of energy that's used for this, I mean, actually, you know what? There probably are hundreds of millions of cattle, chickens, other forms of livestock kept for slaughter or other forms of use, right? I would not be surprised at all, right? It's probably an understatement, right? It might be somewhere in the billions, you don't know, right? But well, I don't know, but the thing is that these, all of the electricity that's used, all the antibiotics that's used, we could be using that for something else. And not only that, but the methane that is produced from cows, for instance, is the worst gas in terms of like global warming, right? So if you care about global warming, then maybe you should be a vegetarian, right? Or at the very least, not eat like beef or something. But my point still stands. But anyway, I'm gonna end it here. It's been quite a long video. If you liked it, leave a like and a subscribe. Comment your thoughts in the comments. I'm interested to see what you guys think about this. And yeah, peace.